Crosstracks case management system. That is what we are talking about today. Are you using a case management system? What are you waiting for? If you don't use a case management system, you really need to look into implementing that into your business regimen. I've been at it with Crosstracks now a little over a year, and it's just been a game changer for my business. They are SOC 2 certified, SOC 2 Type 2 certified. If you don't know what that means, it means that their encryption system is second to none, and you have to go through a whole screening process to figure out if you can even qualify for that, and they have. So you know with certainty your data is being protected. I don't think there's another case management system out there that offers that same ability to have the SOC 2 Type 2 certification. As you guys know, I've been singing the praises of Crosstracks, and I really believe in this product, and I believe you should check it out. Contact Brad, contact Pat, one of the team members over there, and see if it's right for you. Crosstracks case management system, check it out today.
Are you an investigative professional? Did you know you can find the best private investigator resources using investigatorstoolbox.com? This resource community was built exclusively for licensed investigators and investigative professionals. You can network directly with members, educate yourself through free webinars and blogs, and even create your own customizable research library. Membership starts for as little as 49 cents a day. Download the Investigators Toolbox app or visit our webpage at www.investigators-toolbox.com.
Welcome to today's episode of PI Perspectives. Alexis Diaz from LH Funding joins us. Alexis is an attorney in New York and also works in case funding. This is a great client stream for licensed PIs if you know how to foster the relationship. Not sure what legal funding is? Let's join the two and hear all about it. Please welcome Alexis Diaz and your host, private investigator Matt Spare.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spare, your host. Today, we are staying in New York, and I dragged out a friend of mine who I co-hosted a marketing event with attorneys about a week and a half ago, and we were discussing doing an episode about funding and just understanding how the funding world works and how investigators can kind of latch on to that. So I want to welcome Alexis Diaz to the program. Alexis, how are you?
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. Alexis and I go way back. She's an attorney also as well as in the funding world, and we run circles in the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. So Alexis, tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into the business? So
I graduated law school in 2011 and immediately got into practicing plaintiff's personal injury, which is what I've been doing since then. Worked for a few great law firms throughout the years and tried cases, really got into it and built a career out of being a plaintiff's personal injury trial attorney.
Right.
And probably, I'm going to say 2015-ish, maybe 2015, 2016, I knew I wanted to open my own practice. So I kind of had to think about, well, what am I going to do in the meantime? Like, what's the transition? And
right.
Honestly, an opportunity came into my lap, but because I met somebody who did what we call in the industry plaintiff's funding. And if you have no idea what it is, which I didn't until I got into this business,
right.
There are companies out there, including the one that I currently work for, that provide essentially cash advances to people who have personal injury lawsuits.
Right.
And the reason that is a need is that from the time that you file a lawsuit for someone to the time that the case either settles or goes to trial and hopefully gets a successful result for the injured person, it takes a long time.
Sure.
And if you've been injured and you can't work, or if you've been injured and your medical bills are crazy because there's not enough insurance or whatever it is to cover it, there was no sort of recourse because banks aren't giving, loans to people with these cases. And
right.
In New York specifically, I am just talking about New York here.
Mm-hmm.
It's against the rules of ethics for attorneys to be able to essentially loan their clients money,
Right.
because you get into this weird situation where you don't want to be the lawyer and the banker. Like
Yeah.
it would it would definitely be problematic. So the rules, at least in New York, totally prohibit
Yeah,
that.
and let's expand on that, right? So if you've got a settlement offer, if an insurance company is basically offering money on person's case, um, if the attorney has a vested interest in collecting their money back, they may try and convince them to take that settlement when they could really probably get more on the case, right? So I can totally understand how there is an ethical issue on that.
Yeah, exactly. And not all states are the same. There are some states that allow attorneys to do that.
Mhm.
I frankly, because that's not where I practice, I don't know the specific ins and outs. What I do
Sure.
know is that it ends up being more of a straight up, I mean, we call it a disbursement, but essentially it's like it's a write-off. The same way that I spend them, I put money up front to file a lawsuit in court and I get that money back
Right.
as long as my client's successful,
Right.
with whatever the settlement is, it would be the same. Whereas, normal plaintiff funding, and of course we'll get into that. I'm like jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
you can sort of charge interest where attorneys are allowed to give clients money. In certain states, my understanding is that they cannot charge interest, obviously. So focusing, like I said, specifically on New York,
Right.
that this is why there was a need for plaintiff funding, because there was nothing there. I mean, this isn't brand new, but I'm making a point that there was nothing there until there was. And now clients can essentially have some sort of a bridge while their cases are being litigated, so that they're not just settling for way less than what their case is worth because they're desperate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Life
Okay,
happens,
sorry.
especially these last few years, right? With COVID and folks being unemployed and not knowing where their next check was going to come from, and you add the pressures of, we don't know when we're having trials again. It could be a lot longer. Remember how I told you it was going to be this long? Well, now it's going to be even longer because we're not there are no trials, right? So that really affected your world, with as far as lending goes, right?
It did. Interestingly, though, on the lending side, at least what I personally have found was when this all started, COVID, I mean, I sort of anticipated the floodgates opening. And I found, like, me personally, though I have spoken to a few, colleagues in the industry that somewhat agree, it wasn't the same rush, like people wanting a couple thousand here and there, the way that, frankly, this tends to happen right around this season, the holiday.
Of course, right.
And I'm not, and I don't make light of the situation, because
Yeah.
I truly think, if you're going to do this, you really do need to understand, the people who are asking for this money, because they're desperate. I mean, that's truly what this is. I mean, no one wants to talk to me and ask me for money. I mean, they don't, no one really wants to do this, but
They've probably tapped out their family members already and have nowhere else to go, right?
the bank of family and friends, as they say, or,
Yes.
or whatever it is. So I think I maybe initially was expecting that. And then just the way things went down with the courts completely shutting down, the stimulus being approved, and frankly, I'm not getting political, but just people basically being able to make more money not working than working, really changed a little bit of the game. Another aspect of funding that I haven't gotten into yet, but for just this portion of the conversation, medical funding. So another thing that my company and other companies do is if someone needs a procedure done for their case, a lot of times, yes, it can be put on a lien to be paid back later, or insurance will cover it, whether it's like New York is a no-fault state for motor vehicle accidents. So no fault will pick it up, workers' compensation. But if your case doesn't involve that aspect, and let's say you have Medicaid or Medicare, and that particular doctor doesn't take that, the doctor's like, well, I need to get paid up front. Something that else that we do is we will pay the doctor up front. I negotiate with the doctor. I make sure that I get the right deal for my client, or for the plaintiff, excuse me. But that slowed down because medical procedures weren't happening, elective surgeries weren't happening.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. So this business, the entire business, I mean, being a lawyer, having clients, having your own case, and then on the finance side was very much affected by COVID.
I think you have a real advantage to being an attorney and doing this kind of work because understanding the valuation of cases and how negotiating works, and what is a realistic number, a value number to a particular injury. There's a real advantage to wearing both hats. Although sometimes I believe it could probably get frustrating and confusing at times.
Yeah. So I will preface this again, being a lawyer, I obviously do not give my own clients money through the company I work for, just putting it all out there. There definitely don't. In fact, I tell people all the time, I joke I'm the worst person for this business because I talk people's clients out of taking money because I'm very cognizant of the fact that this is not.
There is a cost.
Yeah, there's a cost, and this is because we're non-recourse, meaning we're taking, the company whose money this is taking all the risk. So in the event we lend someone money and then their case gets lost for whatever reason, they're not on the hook. Right. So the normal usury laws don't apply, and frankly, there's no real barrier to interest being charged now. Right. Again.
And that's why there's no barrier, right? Because you're assuming the risk, you're laying the money out, and I'm sure it probably doesn't happen that often, but there are times that it does happen. The unlosable case, right? You lose. A jury hates a person for whatever reason, even though they have liability and they have whatever. It happens. I've seen it in my time. I've seen the unlosable case. Totally. You see it happen.
And not to say that, at least I can only speak for myself and how I am and the company that I work for. We don't take advantage of people. I mean, I would rather just not lend money if I feel that it's going to end up being problematic on the back end. But the point is that there's a cost to all of that. So because I said I have my own clients, I see how all this work. I've done this now my entire career. So when I'm speaking to a plaintiff client on the funding side, I'm frankly speak to them the same way I would speak to my own clients. And I think that there's a sense of, it's very, at least I've been told, right? It's very refreshing speaking to me because I'm not trying to sell them anything. Right. I'm simply just telling them like it is.
Yeah, usually talking them out of it, right?
Yeah, but again, also too, I mean, what's also good, they're lawyers who a lot of times say, listen, if you're going to do this, I don't want you to do this, but if you're going to do this, speak to her because she actually knows what she's doing. Yeah. And there's that level of trust there. It is very different doing this as an attorney. I feel like that sense of ickiness or sliminess that, you might think about when you're thinking of this lending aspect goes away when you're dealing with someone that you trust and actually knows the industry and frankly has a law license to protect, right? I mean, I never would ever put myself in jeopardy and want to hurt others. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And I've seen that natural progression of attorneys get into this business. Quite a few actually that I know have basically taken it to that next step. Right? They settled their case. They get a big amount of money. What do I do with this money now? I'll get into funding. Right? So that does happen a lot. Does your firm also lend money to law firms on cases or just people?
So my particular company, that's not what we focus our business in. We really just lend money to the actual plaintiff or the victim in the case, or we will pay the doctor directly. Right. There's of course exceptions to the rule because it's not my company, it's not my money, so I don't necessarily make those specific decisions. I think that there are some attorneys that we might lend to, but there are specific companies out there who I know, who I've worked with before on a referral basis, that's solely do attorney lending, which of course is a whole nother aspect of all this, like case costs or I guess it's either going to be on the case cost side or just, hey, I'm attorney A, my client's case settled. This is going to be my legal fee, but I need money now because I got to make payroll. Right? Or so there is that aspect, and the concept is similar, but of course it is a little different because now you're dealing with an attorney as opposed to dealing with a client. So it's just not something like I said that my company really does, but there are good ones out there who I trust. And
Sure.
it's nice because, like I said, going back to the whole COVID argument, a lot of attorneys who I know, personally, have really, really, really struggled.
Mhm.
A lot of solos, which I feel I'm a true solo.
Yeah.
My receptionist, my paralegal,
You're
my
a hybrid.
the
Yes.
attorney. I answer my own phones, write out my own papers, go to the post office. But true solos I know have really suffered because courts were closed. So if your money's not coming in, it's hard to then keep the cookie jar full so that you can advance on other cases. And
Sure.
you have to pay your investigator, you have
Yeah.
to pay experts, you have to file, the lawsuits. I mean, that adds up.
Oh, it completely affected the industry because not having that capital to spend on advertising means not bringing in new cases, or, not having a trial date means not doing trial prep and getting things ready to go, not serving subpoenas, not taking witness statements, not contacting witnesses and saying, hey, this is ready to go. Where are you these days? Like that kind of stuff. So that really it affected my industry and some of my clients that were able to get funding in whatever way, whether it be a PPP or other matters, right? That helped keep my lights on,
Yeah.
which was interesting. Even when this all went down, it was like some phone conversations of like, okay, you like to cook? Tell me how you make steak, right? That kind of stuff. That was the first month or so. Nobody was touching any files or doing anything. It's just like, I'm just calling you to make sure you're still alive, like how are things going. And then slowly but surely, it probably took about 6 weeks or so for someone to actually pick up a file. I know there were people in my industry that they offered the service of going to law firms, picking up their files and bringing certain files to attorneys at their home, right?
Yeah.
They didn't want to go into the city and deal with it. And we're deemed essential services, so we're allowed to work. So yeah, sure, we'll go and pick up files and bring them wherever you want to go. Like that was another way for us to pivot and make money. So everybody did what they had to do.
Right. You hit the nail on the head with that. Pivoting was frankly crucial.
Yeah.
To be, I think, as an attorney to be able to, and in the legal space to be able to survive here. I know I had to, some cases had to be, settled, and whether it was for the client, always for the client, but I mean, some cases I told the client, hey, we're either going to be here for a long time or this. And, some clients were more than happy to settle. On the finance side, a lot of it was, like you said, checking in, a lot of this and that. I'm very fortunate to me personally. I rent space from an amazing law firm who have been very good to me. I picked up extra work, it's all about pivoting, but it is crazy. And if you're, like I said, someone who is trying to keep the lights on, and, I remember early on in my practice, I don't have a very, it's not a super old practice, but the first couple of months I did my own witness statements, I mean, it's
shame on you.
listen.
I'm glad to see that's changed. We're actually doing work for you these days. So
sometimes, you had to do what you had to do. And I think that getting, I guess, back to the whole idea of, if you're an attorney, or if you're, and whether you're a small firm, big firm, and you really do need that funding help. And again, banks aren't just giving people loans. Like, it's just doesn't work that way.
It's not 2005.
The fact that there are companies out there that at least can work with you on that. And again, it's not something, you don't want to like hang your hat on that, but whether it's, one specific case case funding, or lines of credit that are offered through sort of these companies. I mean, I know a handful of very prominent firms that use that because it's better for them for then taking out a line of credit at a bank or something like that. I mean, it's, the idea is just that there are resources, and I feel like we all need a lifeline every once in a while.
Sure.
And there's no shame in being able to utilize all the tools that you can, and if at the end of the day, it's all to advance, helping out the plaintiffs who you've frankly taken an oath to help and have their case. And also, I'm very fortunate right now that I don't have to deal with that, but pay your staff.
Yeah.
Like I can't even imagine like having to let staff go, not pay them, because now that's trickling down. And
so did you like lay off half of yourself during that time or what?
I don't know, those first few months, I don't know. I lived in sweatpants and woo, I know.
A little crazy. I remember.
I think I lost a little chunk of myself those first few. The second I could get back to the office, I could, because it was rough.
I remember those conversations. I mean, you and I spoke frequently, actually during that time.
Yeah.
Just of like, hey, what's going on with your clients? And I'll tell you what's going on with mine, like that kind of stuff. And even trying to be creative and saying, okay, they're opening up, you can go and eat in places, like, let's go out and do stuff now.
Yes.
And we did that too.
Yes. Thank goodness. I mean, I stayed in New York City the entire pandemic. So, especially that beginning of the pandemic, which was great, I guess, in ways. I felt normal. Like I had my normal life somewhat, but it was also so weird and scary too. But when outdoor dining, opened up, it was so refreshing. I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care how cold it is.
Okay. So it was February last year and I was outdoor dining and I'm like, this isn't so bad. I'm wearing a coat, I got my hat on and they've got heaters around and I'm a survivor, right?
I got my to-go cup of whatever margaritas they were giving out. I know we survived. I mean, that's what it was, but it's nice to sort of somewhat be on the other side of this all.
It's funny that a lot of those restaurants like stopped serving dessert because they just wanted to turn over the tables faster, like eat and get out. You got somebody else coming.
I can't. Well, I certainly found some comfort in ice cream, like a lot of ice cream during those first few months. So
sure.
We had to get ourselves back in check after that.
Right, exactly. It's the accountability. So we're rambling here. We're going to actually take a break real quick, and when we come back, I really want to focus in on how this industry affects the private investigator and how we can, like, there is that symbiotic relationship that you don't really realize of how you can help one another to gain business and really gain opportunities for one another. So everybody sit tight. And when we come back, we're going to dive into that stuff.
Okay.
I want to talk to everybody today about ScopeNow.com. ScopeNow has been a big time sponsor of this program for quite some time. And I just love their service. I've been using them since the beginning. I'm one of their beta customers, and it's been so awesome to see them grow into the business that they are today and just how they just keep reinventing themselves and pushing themselves to get more and more information. What it comes down to is ScopeNow is a tool that you definitely need to use if you do social media investigations, any internet research, and really spending less time digging around and looking for information. I think is one of the best points of how ScopeNow can help you. Their AI platform, their analytics are amazing. You really get an idea of what you need. You're reducing the time, you're reducing the manpower that you're spending on doing this research because they're essentially doing it for you, and they're doing it correctly, which is most important. One of the new things that they're actually offering is this flagging system where you can flag behaviors and really highlight and look out for fraud. If you're doing a lot of fraud research, this is a fantastic tool, and you can set up alerts. So you have particular people that you're looking at, you can actually set up alerts to get notifications when the criteria that you set up is actually is flagged and goes off. It's really, really amazing. And their relationship and association analytics are top notch, really cutting edge and really, really cool. When they brought that out on version 3, it was a game changer. I mean, really being able to see how people interact together and having that relationship, analysis is really, really something that's cool. One of the other things about being involved with ScopeNow is their ability to offer webinars. Their team is cutting edge on putting together and getting out really, really great content. If you're a member of ScopeNow, if you know who they are, you've seen them around on LinkedIn, you'll know that they're constantly doing webinars on these new websites that are coming out, and they're really staying on top of it. And don't forget, any reports that you generate, you can actually white label those reports and put your own logos on and really make them look professional, which could equate to more billing for you as well. So check them out today. It's www.scopenow.com. They're a great, great company. They should be one of the tools in your toolbox, along with whatever kind of search engines you do. You need to make sure that ScopeNow is a part of that suite. ScopeNow.com.
In 2019, Investigation Education Consultants added a new affiliate in its never-ending quest to provide quality professional investigative training. IEC is now offering certificate courses and investigative training online. Our website, iecoit.com, will soon offer a certificate in professional investigation for those interested in entering the investigative field. There'll be standalone investigation classes for those seeking continuing education credits, CEUs, or just interested in taking classes for their own personal or professional interests. The classes currently available are Foundations of Investigation, Legal Investigation, Criminal Investigation, Fraud Investigation, Background Investigation, Interviews and Statements, Skip Tracing Locates, Ethics, and Report Writing. Investigator Toolbox members will receive a 20% discount off the listed price. So visit iecoit.com. Are you a member of NCISS? Do you know what this great organization does? The National Council of Investigation and Security Services was formed in 1975 to keep a watchful eye on legislation that affects our industry. Now more than ever, there are data privacy and DMV issues popping up all over the country. Consider joining and supporting this much-needed watchdog for our industry. Learn more at nciss.org. Check out the latest issue of PI Magazine. Rob Freed and Dr. Henry Lee graced the cover. Available online or via hard copy.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Sperry, your host. We're joined today by Alexis Diaz from the LH Funding Group. Alexis, welcome back to the program.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so we learned what funding is, right? We learned how that works and the ins and outs of that. Now I want to talk a little bit about how the investigator and the funding company can live together. So I'm going to relate to you some of my experiences here, and then we'll pepper in. So there are a couple of ways that I've done this. I've had funding companies come to me to do locates on people they've lent money to, right? So we gave money to so-and-so through this particular law firm. The law firm lost touch with this person, and now we need to like figure out what's going on here, how we get our money back, like that kind of deal. So that was one way. Another way was to do screenings, right? So someone was potentially going to lend money to somebody. They wanted to do a bit of a background on this person to make sure that they're not a complete creep and, that there's no issue there. And then there was the relationship I was having with someone like yourself, right? Here's my client list. What's your client list? Let's see if we know if we can steer business to one another. So we have that aspect to it. Or for me, when I'm meeting with it's called an intake, right? So a new case sign up, having a conversation with the people while we're doing it, and they say, so you're telling me I can't work? How am I going to pay my rent? Right. So then you start talking about, there's funding options. You may want to talk to the attorney about it. I know there's a company like this company over here that does that kind of stuff. Right. So those are the real aspects for me personally, how I've managed to work that in. So what's been your experience?
So I guess starting from the first thing you talked about, which is, losing track of, the client. So that hasn't, knock on wood, for the most part, happened to me. The funding clients all have my cell phone number and they call me all the time, such as life. So usually I don't lose them, but agreed. I mean, that's for sure 100%. That would be important to me, like as a funding company, to have a good investigator always in my back pocket for all of the, oh no, this happened. So 100% agreed with that. And then, but then tying in again with the, sharing client lists. I mean, it's so important in this industry to have those great relationships, because if nothing else, I would never feel comfortable, referring whether my plaintiff to a vendor or another lawyer to a vendor, or a vendor to a lawyer, frankly, if I didn't have that trust, because as we all know, our name is everything, right? So if we don't have that integrity, we're going to lose that. So for sure, building that clientele or that relationship with a particular other vendor. So 100,000,000% on that.
Yeah.
And like you said, we go back a long way, but that trust, that relationship builds up over time.
Sure.
Because there's a ton of investigators out there. There's a ton of funding companies out there.
Mhm.
There's good apples and bad apples. And,
Yeah.
it's really, really important.
As you go to those networking events, like, you not only should you be talking to the lawyers that are there, you should be talking to the other vendors that are there and making relationships with those people. And, this way, when it comes down to like something that you and I did recently, right? Hey, I'm going to throw my own little soiree here and I'd like you to co-sponsor. Do you want to be a part of that? Like, I would have never gotten that phone call from you if you didn't know me, right?
No.
If we didn't have that relationship already from doing that stuff. And, you're obviously going to introduce me to people that you do business with, and you want to know me. And before you say like, yeah, like this is a good guy, it's not just like, yeah, he paid money to co-sponsor, but I have no idea who he is,
Right. That happens. Like that actually happens more than you think. But for me, and it is, and frankly, what I think adds that extra level of trust is, it isn't just, oh yeah, he seems like really great. It's, I've personally used him. Like I personally do business with him, so I can refer. I mean, that's where I think that matters. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then I don't think you should be like, frankly, referring other people. But I guess.
No, I mean, that personal story testimonial, I mean, it goes so far in everything. I mean, that's networking 101. This is why we network. This is why we pay money to go to events and have that face-to-face with people, because, I find getting that introduction, from Alexis to another attorney, hey, I do work with this guy, Dean, and you should do work with him too. Dean, here's Matt. I use Matt to do stuff. He's great. You should use him. Right. So by you already having that relationship with Dean, he trusts you. Right. And you can vouch for me because we have a relationship and you trust me. Right. So everybody wins. Yeah. Hopefully Matt doesn't screw up the job and make it look horrible.
So. Then I'm just blaming you. No. But there's that. And then I guess the other aspect of just when we're thinking about, and this is like obviously the tougher aspect, right? Where it's, hey, you're an investigator. Let's say an attorney comes to you and says, look, I really, or you're talking to an attorney that maybe you've worked with before, maybe you're catching up, whatever the situation is, but you're speaking to an attorney and they're saying to you, look, I've got this great case. I need an investigator to go take these, 10 witness statements or find this or find that, but they're concerned or they're hesitant because of costs. I mean, look, on the one hand, of course, you want to do the right thing. You want, like, no, I want to do this for you. I want to do this for your plaintiff. I want to help this person out, but you've got mouths to feed and staff to pay. And the same, for the attorney. That's where I think it's helpful from the investigator side to know that there's things that exist, which is essentially companies out there that might help out on case costs.
So I think it's even more along those lines, not so much of that scenario. And that scenario is real. It does happen, right? Okay. I can't afford it. Okay. Well, here's a way for you to get money. Sure. I think there's also that conversation of, is this going to get me more money on my case, right? I may get the full tender of the case without doing the investigative work. Like that's one of the hurdles that I have to overcome in doing my work. Cause they like, why should I pay, why should I rack up $1,000 or $1,500 worth of investigative disbursements when I'm just going to get the full policy anyway? And listen, that's a way to look at it. I remember I had a conversation with an attorney and it was a death case, a motor vehicle case, and there were some questions about a highway road design, right? And if we were able to prove road design or prior complaints, prior notice, actual notice, that is a home run. And I'm having this conversation with the guy, and he's like, I don't know if I want to spend money on you to have you do this. Now, and preface that by saying I had done some research on social media and actually found people complaining about this and people on social media saying like, I've told the town 1,000 times, like I attended this meeting and they're still doing nothing. Like that's credible. That is a credible lead. And I'm like, let's go get statements from these people. It's like, how much is that going to cost? I'm like, I don't know, maybe another $1,000 when all said and done. Is I don't know. And I'm asking him like, okay, so if I could get roadway defect and I could take the value of your case from 100,000, because that's what the policy is on this, to the actual value of the case, which could be a few $1,000,000 because this person who got killed was 27 years old and was a nurse and had like a degree. And like, there was a long life for this person to have, and they were jogging and they got hit by a car. Right.
Yeah.
And a really, really sad story. And this guy did not want to spend the money. And then I'm just like, okay, have you ever had a client of yours complain about the investigator expense? He's like, no, in the 15 years we've been doing business together, it's never happened. And I'm like, so then why are we having this conversation, dude? like, do you feel that you have that responsibility of keeping the cases down, like the cost down, because you're cheap, or would you rather do it the right way? It's like, it was a very weird conversation to have.
You hit the nail on the head 100%. And in that scenario, that's completely right. I mean, when you can spend a little bit of more money to really change the value and the posture of this case,
right?
To me, that's a no-brainer. And even if I had to, whatever I had to do in that particular case, I would get that done, because there is that sense of like obligation to the client and whatever, and not even
fiduciary responsibility that you got to go after the big pockets if you can,
and at least explain to the client, hey, because that's the other thing too. I mean, that attorney's saying that, but they're frankly, in my opinion, obligated to tell their client, hey, this is what's going on, because
you want us to do this, right? Should we go forward?
And I'm not to say that, again, now clients have the option when they're signing the retainer to say, hey, I want my attorney to pay all the upfront costs, knowing I will pay them back, or we can pay them upfront. I don't know what client chooses to pay that upfront, which is
2% of the time.
Right.
It happens like literally almost never.
Right. And I'm not saying that client should do that, but at least be aware of like, hey, what do you need to do in order to get that done? But again, as the attorney, if you're taking on this case, you got to be able to put your money where your mouth is. And
Sure.
I'm not trying to make light of, like, especially in this climate, but then you need to either then refer that case out to somebody who can do that for your client. Again, you're still going to be paid, or you're going to have to take get the funds.
Fundings. Yeah. So which ties it into what we're talking about here.
It does, but I'm just again on the point.
that.
But then the flip side sort of what you're saying, and I got to go back to my example of taking my own witness statement. The case I did that on was a case where there was very limited insurance. It was never the suit was never going to be filed. I did that for essentially, yes, I did that to keep the costs down. Because
Shame on you. Shame on you.
But there was such limited coverage. I had, I made that executive choice of, there was only so much for my client to recover. And he was happy because I didn't, what I think a lot of attorneys, especially in bigger firms, don't actually run their business like a business. And I felt like, I had to make a business decision. And at the end of the day, that made sense because there was such limited coverage.
Oh, absolutely. And then like you could run into problems though doing that if you need to take a notarized statement, right? And then you end up having a trial, and now you can't depose that person.
Luckily, I did go get it. I did have it notarized by not me, so we were good. I covered my bases.
Right. But these are the things that you got to take into consideration. I always I frown upon that. I mean, I get it, but I frown upon it just because it's not really the proper way to do things. And that's my own person's opinion. And as a businessman, I want the business. Don't do it that way.
Well, no, you're 100% right. The story, I guess, is good for, hey, I understand where sometimes, you're making a certain decision, but on a case where, like you said, you're going to be in court, you're actually you have to have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted, then you really do need to do it right.
So let me ask you a question. Have you, in your experience in doing this money lending stuff, have you come across any cases that ended up being fraud?
So we've definitely come across cases where, I'm going to back up. We've come across cases where we get a call and it already sounds shady, and there's a company or an organization called Alpha. And that's kind of like the one regulatory somewhat board for funding companies.
Right.
And you then will come to find out, hey, this scammer has been calling like a million funding companies,
Right.
whether they're making up their lawyer, whatever it is. So I've seen that.
Okay.
That's not, super specific, I guess, to us. But as far as, hey, yes, as it has somebody's client come to us through an attorney that we trust, again, because what we don't do, and I know there are companies out there that do, is I don't direct market to plaintiffs. Like there are the companies you see on TV commercials that are like, hey, get cash now, or whatever. I don't do that. I would never want to do that. I think that is very predatory. Not for me.
Right.
So I only work with attorneys that I know and trust. Right. So, I mean, if I get an attorney referral, great. But these attorneys are people that have been in my life for my career for the last 10 plus years. So when their client comes to me, and they're essentially vouching for their client, right? Because they're signing off on the contract, on the funding agreement too. They think that the client's case is.
So they're signing off as guarantors, right? Is that?
It's less of a guarantor because again, it's non-recourse. It's more that it's an acknowledgement that this is happening. Like I would never lend somebody's client money.
Right. Or that like they understand.
Everybody's aware of what's going on. Right.
Right.
And then two, it's that the attorney at the end of the case, should the case settle favorably, they're cutting us the check. It's not that they're hoping, they're like, here, client, you pay this person back.
Yeah. And they're also hopefully notifying you that the case is settled. Because I think that falls through the cracks sometimes too. I've seen that.
I've seen it too. It is rare, but again, if you work with people that you trust and
if someone uses a case management system, that's
like a real system, and also
back in the day, they didn't have that stuff, so you could see that happening.
And if you're properly statusing,
the reason I mentioned the fraud thing is that I can recall an experience that I had probably about 5 or 6 years ago. It was hilarious because I met with a guy in the Bronx, and he supposedly had this injury and this accident. The liability was a home run case and blah, blah, blah. So we signed it up, and as I'm signing up, he goes, yeah, and I want to lend money on the case. He's like, my mother just passed away and I need to do a funeral, blah, 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 like all the stuff. Right. So fast forward like 2 or 3 years, and I get a call to go do an intake and up in the Bronx, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's the same dude. Right. And I'm sitting in the guy's house, and I'm just like, okay, I've been here before. Like I know this guy. Right. And different accident, same area of injury, same dead mother. Literally 3 years later, like his mom died again. All right. So I'm like, okay. And this guy was like, he was really like, I'm not signing these papers unless they can guarantee me I'm getting money. And I'm like, excuse me for a minute. I need to go outside and make a phone call real quickly. And I went outside and I called the attorney who I really like, hey, not for nothing, this is what's going on here. And he said, hold on. And he goes to, I guess there's a database to check and see. And he sees that this guy has borrowed money before, from this and that, same injury and all that. And I'm like, red flag. So I came back in, and I'm just like, I'm sorry. The attorney's, he's going to pass on the case. And this guy threw me out of his house. Like, if there was ever a time that I thought I was going to like fisticuffs, like this was it. I'm like, okay, this is really happening here. This guy's going to try and swing at me. But yeah, he was super aggro because I caught him. I was like, no, dude, it's not happening today.
And this unfortunately, this happens. I mean, and you really have to have your radar on, I think, and again, that's where like that level of, wanting to make a lot of money in this industry versus wanting to do the right thing and, being cognizant who you're working, who's sending you cases, all that good stuff. I mean, you've got
these were 2 respectable firms. Like they were really well. If I told you the name of the firms, you'd be like, wow, really? Yep. I mean, and it like this guy, it's like, hey man, you got caught. Just say good job, investigator, and move on to the next scam.
Right, exactly. If you were my investigator in that case, I'd be like, thank you for saving me the aggravation. But I guess the point is like, fraud happens regardless of, how good you are, and just people are terrible a lot of times. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen it. I just try to be I try to be careful. No one's perfect, but try to be careful.
It was funny because I distinctly remember being outside and talking to this guy, and he's like, yeah, but the injury is like so good, and liability is like a home run. I'm like, he's selling you a bag of goods, man. It's not like he's telling you exactly everything you want to hear because this guy knows. And I think this guy, the attorney, went back and did even further research on this guy, and he's been doing it for years.
Oh yeah.
Like it wasn't just these two. There's probably about 6 or 7, and like it was a problem. Yeah, big time scammer. And I was like, got caught, and he knew, like he was like really aggressive with me, and I'm like, okay, all right, here we go.
Nah, the gig was up, as they say.
Yeah. I live to talk about it though, which is nice. So we're going to begin to wind down over here. But I just, I wanted to educate folks on doing this stuff and what it is, and just, understanding the relationship that you can have with this type of industry, right? And realizing it's a revenue stream if you play it right for both of us, right?
Yeah,
for you and me,
It is.
having that symbiotic relationship, you always have to look for different streams. It's not just, personal injury attorney or whatever, just understanding that there are other gateways for relationships, and just making sure that you tap in on that.
100%. And again, with what I do, I was just actually having this conversation with someone the other day. There is that ick factor a lot of times with this industry, and it can really weigh you down.
Sure.
And what I have found that has kept me, being able to like look at myself in the mirror every single day and think, I'm doing it right, is again surrounding myself with really good people, and
Sure.
always just staying true to the goal and the big picture, which is helping. I mean, truly is helping people. And if I can do that as a lawyer with my own practice, which I love, and I'm so happy that I have that, and also doing it on the funding side and helping out my attorney colleagues,
Sure.
Helping their clients, without screwing them over. And then also, listen, having great relationships with vendors who become my friends and helping them out too. I mean, then it's nice. And I feel like, my bubble stays intact, and and we're all doing good. So
Yeah. So, if folks want to get a hold of you, Alexis, how do they get a hold of you?
Then let's see, you can email me. My email is alexis@lhfundingcorp.com. Probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Mhm.
I am trying to think. I am on Instagram. My firm has an Instagram. It's Diaz Law Group. You can reach me that way too.
Yep.
That has all the rest of my contact info. So I would say those two ways are the best way to reach me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. It was great
Thank
chatting.
you so much for having me, Matt.
Yeah. And I hope we educated some folks on what this whole money changing business is.
Yeah. And if anyone has any questions, I mean, I'm always available, open book. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexis.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch everybody next week on the next show.
Bye.
Special thanks to Alexis for teaching us about legal funding and how we can use it to our advantage as investigators. We'd also like to thank Crosstracks, Scope Now, NCISS, and IEC for sponsoring this show. So please support our great supporters. Did you know Investigators Toolbox has an app for Apple and Google now? Take a few minutes and check out the website to really help boost your business and your research capabilities. Use code PIP 2018-36 to save $20 when you join. If you have a question or a comment about the show, just email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We want your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. And we'll be back next Monday with a new show. So make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.